أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Verse number 120 of Surah Al Imran. إن تمسسكم حسنة تسؤهم وإن تصبكم سيئة يفرحوا بها وَإِن تَصْبِرُوا وَتَتَّقُوا لَا يَضُرُّكُمْ كَيْدُهُمْ شَيْئًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطٌ. If some good should befall you, it upsets them. But if some ill should befall you, they rejoice at it. Yet, if you are patient and God-wary, their guile will not harm you in any way. Indeed, Allah comprehends what they do. Inna Allah bima ya'maluna muhit. Well, this is a continuation of verses 118 and 119, when the Muslims were warned that لا تتخذوا بطانة من دونكم, do not take a privy, a confidant, except from amongst yourselves. And then in verse 119, we read that they do not like you while you like them. ها أنتم أولئك تحبونهم ولا يحبونكم. You love them, but they do not love you. And you believe in the book, all of it. And when they meet you, they say, we believe. But when they are alone, they bite their fingers out of rage at you. So, continuing with that, God mentions that it's even more to that. إِن يَمْسَسْكُمْ حَسَنَةٌ تَسُؤْهُمْ. If you meet something good, if some good should befall you, it upsets them. They become very unhappy. Although they just show friendship, they pretend that they are so sorry about what has happened, but certainly in their hearts, that's something different. وَإِن تُصِبْكُمْ سَيِّئَةٌ يَفْرَحُوا بِهَا. And if ill should befall you, they rejoice at it. They do not, of course, show that, but this is what happens in their hearts. But the verse tells us that although this guile, although this pretense and the animosity which is inside are very dangerous, but if you are patient and if you are God-wary, وَإِن تَصْبِرُوا وَتَتَّقُوا لَا يَضُرُّكُمْ كَيْدَهُمْ شَيْئًا. Their guile will not hurt you, will not harm you in any way. You will not be hurt by that. And this is a very important condition that Allah is setting here. We see how Muslims have been inflicted by the guiles, the attacks, the animosity of people from different nationalities, different countries, different races. However, they were actually not protected by God. Why? Because these two conditions were not met. In tasbiru, be patient, and above that, watattaqu, be God-wary. And this is what, of course, many Muslims didn't have over the history, taqwa. And God has not promised to unconditionally support Muslims. This is what Banu Israel thought about themselves, that God would unconditionally support them, is unconditional on their side. However, that was not the case, and that would not be the case in the about Muslims. So overall, the verse tells us that if Muslims are patient and have taqwa, they will be safe from all animosities. They will go ahead. They will flourish rather than being thwarted in their progress. But of course, we do not see that happening, and therefore it shows that these conditions are not met. Of course, it says, لا يضركم كيدهم شيئا. In other verses, we have that لا يضركم إلا أذى. They cannot harm you except some annoyance. And yes, of course, if animosity is shown, if animosity is inflicted upon us, then certainly there will be annoyance, there will be difficulties. However, no real harm. It cannot stop your progress. But of course, because the conditions are not met. And the reason is that إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطٌ. Allah has promised you to support you, so long as you support Him and His cause, not your own desires. So long as you have patience and taqwa. And if that is the case, and Allah, you fulfill that promise, and Allah will respond, then because Allah is actually comprehending them. They are in the fist of Allah, so to speak. Where can they go? How can they inflict you any harm? The commentators have actually discussed what is the meaning of hasana here. In tamsaskum hasanatun tasu'hum. If some good should befall you. For example, in At-Tibyan, Shaykh Tusi rahmatullah alayhi says that al-muradu bil-hasana huna ma an'ama Allahu alayhim bihi min al-ulfah wal-ghalabah bil-ijtima' al-kalam. This hasana here, the good, of course good has many different meanings, but what is meant by good here is what Allah blessed the Muslims with in their solidarity and unity. And whether this is correct or not, it shows, say, in the eyes of the early commentators, how important this solidarity and unity of Muslims were, so that they have interpreted hasana here as that solidarity. And then he says, وَالْمُرَادُ بِالسَّيِّئَةِ الْمِحْنَةِ بِإِصَابَةِ الْعَدُوِّ مِنْهُمْ لِاخْتِلَافِ الْكَلَامِ. And what is meant by sayyi'ah, by some ill, it is infliction which they endure because of their disunity at the hand of their enemies. And other consequences of disunity and furqah. And this is, both of these opinions about Hasana and Sayyah is the opinion of Hasan al-Basri, Qatada, Ibn Jurayj, and you see the early commentators had actually seen this as the greatest ni'mah and greatest Hasana. And also some very delicate issue has attracted the attention of commentators here as well. And that's the way the expression is used for hasana and sayyah. In tamsaskum hasanatun. Of course, in both cases, the translation here says, if some good should befall you or evil should befall you. However, there's a difference in wording and expression. Tamsaskum, mas is touching. So if any good touches you, they become they become displeased, and this is to show that the slightest good, the slightest blessing and benefit that is acquired by the Muslim would make them angry. And then for the ill, sayya, tusibkum, isaba is used rather than touching. Isaba, of course, is infliction, and they are not happy with the slight inflictions, with the small retreats and defeats. No, they want isaba. They want real harm for you. Okay, this was these series of verses were warning Muslims about who should they take as their allies, as their confidant and privy. And of course, that does not prevent Muslims to be friends with others, to have good relations, interactions in their business, in their other affairs. Now, from verse 121, a number of verses bring the example or cites the example of the Battle of Uhud as something that Muslims should contemplate about and ponder upon it. And the example of in tasbiru wa tattaqu, if you are patient and God-wary, is actually given a clear analysis here by comparison of the Battle of Badr and Battle of Uhud. We know that in the Battle of Badr, the Muslims won. Very surprisingly, despite their small number, despite their very insignificant equipment, and in the Battle of Uhud, in which their number was quite larger, they were defeated. And this wants to show that in tasbiru wa tattaqu is a very important matter. And also other things which actually cause some theological issues for Muslims as well. They are discussed here. Okay. Verse 121 وَإِذْ غَدَوْتَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ تُبَوِّئُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ مَقَاعِدَ لِلْقِتَالِ وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. When you left your family at dawn to settle the faithful in their positions for battle, and Allah is all hearing, all knowing. Now, غَدَوْتَ, of course, means that leaving one's house in the morning. And it shows that as soon as the news of the departure of the army of the Mushrikun from Mecca reached the Prophet, he started to prepare for the battle. And Wallahu Sami'un Alim, God is all hearing, all knowing, is referring to some disputes that happened about the strategy of the battle. And Allah says, I was listening to your discussions about it, and I know what goes in your hearts. I know what you hide in your hearts about it. Now, what happened was this. Of course, here it says that you came out of your house. That means you left Medina. And it shows that the dispute was about, or it is actually alluding to a dispute which was about whether the Muslims should stay in Medina and fight back inside the city, or they have to go outside and meet the enemy outside Medina. So that dispute is, in essence, it says that you left Medina. غَدَوْتَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ. Well, of course, his Ahl were in Medina, his family were in Medina. You left that. And you were actually determining where the army must take positions, what are the strategic positions that they have to have when they meet the army of the Meccans, the polytheists. So, tabawwa means to prepare place. And here, of course, it means strategic places. As I said, there was a dispute that whether, and this was something which was tremendously more dangerous than the Battle of Badr. You know, Battle of Badr, of course, was not an intended battle for the Prophet and for Muslims. They had gone with very insignificant number and also equipment just to confiscate the business caravan of Mecca as a retaliation for what they had confiscated in Mecca from them. And then the army of Mecca surprisingly came and the war happened. However, here it was about revenge. It was about rage. The Meccans were outraged because of the defeat in Badr. They never had expected that such a thing to happen. And that's why after the Battle of Badr, Abu Sufyan warned the people, instructed them that they should not allow their women to mourn, because that would make the sorrow and the anger to relinquish, to vanish from their hearts. And therefore, he pledged that he would not sleep with his wives before he take the revenge of Badr from Meccans. So this was about revenge. This was about the rage of Meccans, which were actually boiling, and everyone knew that they are not coming unequipped. They are not coming to be defeated. They come for a conclusive and decisive win. And therefore, of course, people thought very much about the strategy of the battle. And when the Prophet came out, certain people were unhappy. Now, the way this happened, just I give us a very brief account of the battle, how it started and how it ended, because the following verses are very much, to understand the following verses is very much dependent on whether we have a picture of the Battle of Badr in our mind or not. So I try to give a very short account of the battle. So in the third year of Hijrah, as I said, the Quraysh came out of Mecca with 3,000 cavalries and 2,000 infantries, 5,000 people. That was unprecedented for the time, just to take the revenge of the battle and kill the Prophet, peace be upon him, and finish the issue of Muslims that they had at the time. And in order to actually encourage perseverance in the battlefield, they brought their women and their idols. They brought all of them so that the warriors would not run away from the battle. They should, so that they know that they should fight until the last breath and last drop of blood. Now, the Prophet, of course, knowing, because he had sent some people to find out how many are the number of the enemy, how equipped they are. So he, as soon as the information reached him, he gathered the companions and convened a meeting to discuss the situation and whether they should, what was the strategy of the battle. The more experienced people gave the advice that they should fight inside Medina. And one of these people, interestingly, was Abdullah ibn Ubay, the, of course, head of the Munafiqun. Well, whether he was a Munafiq or not, it didn't matter, because now the army of Mecca was coming to destroy Medina. So he should have been involved as well. So he said that, O Messenger of God, it has never been seen before that we are inside the fences and inside our houses, and any enemy could have defeated us. No one has ever could have defeated us inside Medina. Because if we are inside the Medina, even the women, the slaves can fight back, can stone the enemy as well. So inside the Medina is a better strategy. And Prophet considered actually that advice. And he was inclined towards that as well, because that was a better strategy for Muslims. And why I say this, because later on when the defeat came and people were amazed why we were defeated, they should have considered their opposition to the advice of the Prophet, that they should have fought in Medina rather than going out. And on the other side, there were majority of the companions, and especially the young companions, those who were sensational, emotional, and also some of the very respected people like Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. He stood up, Sa'ad stood up and said, "O Prophet, in the past, when we were polytheists, no Arab had the power to even think of fighting us in Medina, inside the city, even though we were polytheists and idolaters. And now that you are amongst us and we have converted to Islam and God is supporting us, how can they do that? They must let us, so we should not let them come inside Medina. We have to go out and fight. If any one of us is killed, we have become martyrs, and if any of us is saved, he has achieved the honor of jihad in the way of God." And such words and epics increased the number of those who supported the battle outside Medina. So the plan of Abdullah ibn Ubay fell into the minority, and even the Prophet himself. So Prophet wanted to respect the idea of the majority. He said, "Okay, we go out." And later on, when the blame came, of course, those who supported going outside Medina and then ran away from the army of Mecca had to be considered themselves to be responsible for that. In any case, he left the city with one of his companions, the Prophet, with one of his companions, to prepare the camp and chose a strategic position at the foot of Mount Uhud and accommodated his army there. He personally took command of the army and walked the distance between Medina and Uhud on foot, organizing the ranks of the army himself. And there's something very strange mentioned by one of the historians here, the famous historian Al-Halabi in As-Siratul Halabiyya. He writes that the Holy Prophet had not yet reached Uhud when he visited a group of soldiers among his ranks that he had never seen. And he asked, "Who are these?" They said they were some Jews who were allied with Abdullah ibn Ubay and have come to the aid of the Muslims on this occasion. The Prophet said, "You cannot get help from the polytheists to fight the polytheists unless they become Muslims." Of course, the Jews did not accept to become Muslims. And in this way, out of the 1,000 men that the Prophet had, 300 were just cut off from the army, and they went back with Abdullah ibn Ubay. Now, this account is very unlikely, and no other historian or commentator has actually mentioned this. Yes, they have said Abdullah ibn Ubay in the middle of the way. He argued with others, and because he was very unhappy coming out of Medina, because this was against his initial advice, he actually dissuaded people and left the army of the Prophet with 300 of his companions or of his own followers, and left only 700 men for the Prophet, confronting 5,000 people from Mecca. Why I say what Al-Halabi has mentioned in Sirah Al-Halabi is quite unlikely, because first of all, the Prophet never never ever assumed or regarded the Jews to be polytheists. And he says, we do not seek help from polytheists against polytheists. And secondly, the Prophet had actually signed a treaty with the Jews that if Medina was attacked, they have to come and support. And in fact, if there was no Jew among the ranks of the Muslims, it is surprising that why the Jews did not come out. Perhaps they also wished that the Muslims are inflicted with a heavy defeat. And that ties in with previous verses that in tusibkum in yamsaskum hasanatun tasu'kum yasu'kum wa in tusibkum sayyi'atun yafrahu biha. This is about the Jews, isn't it? The whole verses were about the Jews. They were actually waiting and harboring this thought in their hearts that, well, the Prophet will not come back from this battle. So they did not take part. And therefore, what the majority of the commentators, actually all of them except in Sirah al-Harabi, have mentioned that Abdullah ibn Ubay actually dissuaded Muslims to go back to Medina, saying that this is a futile battle, we are not going to win because the situation is such that with the number that we have, with the equipment that we have, we cannot defeat them unless if we are inside Medina. At any rate, the Prophet actually arranged his army, organized them, and ordered Abdullah ibn Jubayr with 50 skilled snipers. He commissioned them to be placed at the mouth of the mountain crevice and strongly advised them not to move in any situation. Even if we pursued the enemy until Mecca, you do not move from your place. And even if the enemy manages to drive us back until Medina, you do not move from your place. Well, you see how strong this advice of the Prophet was. And this mountain crevice was so important that Abu Sufyan also commissioned Khalid bin Walid with 200 soldiers to watch the pass and wait in ambush until the soldiers of Islam withdraw from the valley. And when they withdraw, you immediately attack from behind. And you do not move. Even if you are defeated, you do not move from here. Now, after the battle started, the Muslims were able to crush the Quraysh, as you know the story. With a fierce attack, the Quraysh were forced to flee, and the soldiers of Islam pursued them. Khalid ibn Walid, who considered the defeat of the Quraysh certain, wanted to leave the valley and attack the Muslims from behind. But of course, the shooters and snipers of Abdullah ibn Jubayr stopped them. And they retreated and stayed back there again, watching. Now, Muslims made a great mistake here. Not about, of course, strategic or military mistake in their calculation about the help of God. God had promised, "En tasbiru wa tattaqu," if you are patient and God will. Here, as soon as they saw the retreat of Quraysh, the Muslims left their positions, and even the archers on the mountain. They thought, that's finished. Let's go and take booties. Others are collecting booties. We have to go as well. You see, this was not for God anymore. This was not taqwa anymore. And this is what Allah mentions later on. Because the Muslims were actually on the assumption that God will help them under any situation. And actually the promise of the Prophet was there that we will win. However, that was a conditional promise. So they left, and even the archers left the stronghold and went to the battlefield. And Abdullah ibn Jubayr were left with about 10, 12 archers. And no matter how they tried to stop Khalid ibn Walid, which was going round the mountain, going back to the Muslim troops from behind, they could not stop them, and all of them were killed, martyred actually. So the Muslims were suddenly surrounded from all sides. And when Abu Sufyan and his troops, they saw that Khalid ibn Walid is coming from the behind and Muslims are turning back to fight him, they came back as well. And so Muslims were attacked from front and behind, and of course a great defeat. Now here something else happened as well, and that is the very heartbreaking attitude of Muslims leaving the Prophet in the battlefield and running away. And because our time has come to an end, inshallah, I will finish this story shortly. Just at the beginning of the next session, and then we continue with the verses. The reason I'm going into the details of this battle, because the following verses are actually, because this account has a bearing on the understanding of the following verses. So inshallah, we will continue with that in our next session. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We're just awaiting Shaykh to join us. Inshallah, he'll be with us in a few moments. Shaykh is just having some technical difficulties in joining. It doesn't seem to be allowing him in. So let's just give him a minute. Inshallah, he will be able to join us. Sheikh does not seem able to join us. There seems to be something that's stopping him from joining the call. So we will inshallah investigate this issue for next week, but we'll try and sort this out so that inshallah we can do the Q&A next week. Apologies for the delays, and inshallah we'll see you all next week. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.